A major setback for the White House and its plans for asylum seekers. Plus, the head of Homeland Security visits the border.
People have this notion there's this wall of flame coming and hammering these homes, and they're exploding.
Fire risk and new homes. The question sparked by the wildfire in Northern California as developments pop up in San Diego rural areas.
Seeing the power of theater, the experience as a watcher, but also thinking through how you create those experiences for people.
Crafting very personal stories, the communities who may find their voices on stage. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. Bail bonds groups are taking the fight against California's new bail reform law to voters. They say they've collected enough signatures to place a measure on the 2020 ballot. State elected officials still need to verify them. The proposed referendum calls on stopping the new law that ends cash bond payments as a condition of release from jail. Senate Bill 10 was supposed to go into effect next October. San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer has appointed 2 new citizen advisors to help with public safety. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman says the positions will act as a liaison between the community, the city, and police.
Outside of City Hall, Mayor Faulconer announced new executive directors for the Gang Commission and Police Community Relations Board.
We must strive every day as a city and as a community to strengthen the bonds between our officers and our residents.
Reverend Gerald Brown was tapped by the mayor to lead the Citizens Advisory Board on police and community relations.
He talked to me about the position, about a new creative position that would help to oversee what the CAB is doing right now, and then we want to expand that to make sure that all communities are included.
Brown has worked with the police many times in the past. He helps put on the popular gun buyback program every year in San Diego. The mayor chose former gang member turned pastor Jesus Sandoval to lead the Commission on Gang Prevention and Intervention.
I'm here to make a commitment to the community of San Diego that we will keep the streets safe.
Both Sandoval and Brown will have the ear of Mayor Kevin Faulconer and Police Chief David Neslite.
A voice to both law enforcement and to the mayor on community relations, so they'll make recommendations, whether it be for policy or different things, but they're also going to be the eyes and the ears of the community, so someone who might not want to talk to law enforcement could talk to the Reverend.
So if someone has a problem and didn't want to go directly to police, they could bring concerns to Reverend Brown.
I would talk to the chief. I said, Chief, here's an area that we have, someone's come to me and said that they've been violated. How can we sit down and talk about this before it goes any further? Maybe it's something we can reconcile right away.
Both men start their advisory positions next month. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
A federal judge has blocked President Trump's asylum ban. Days after the election, the president issued a proclamation denying asylum to immigrants crossing the border illegally. Yesterday, a judge sided with the civil liberties groups that have filed a lawsuit. They argue the ban is against the law. This ruling remains in effect for 1 month, barring an appeal. Today, Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen checked out border security. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh says she emphasized efforts to harden the border here in San Diego.
So this is what the Secretary of Homeland Security came to see. Rows of concertina wire placed along this side of the wall. Now as you come down a little farther, you can see that concertina wire starts to peter out right about there. And of course, if you go even farther down, you can see where the concertina wire ends and the border wall ends right there at the sea. So she was also here to tell us what else they plan to do to fortify this border ahead of the migrant caravan. Before Secretary of Homeland Security Kirstjen Nielsen arrived, reporters saw someone swim around the border wall and present themselves to the Border Patrol. This is how some asylum seekers are presenting themselves. Nielsen says they will follow the law, though she blasted the federal judge's temporary injunction today against the president's executive order stating migrants will not be granted asylum if they cross illegally between the ports of entry.
We will also be appealing it as quickly as possible. I have no doubt that we will be successful.
She also pushed back against reports that the military's mission to the border was winding down early.
I spoke to Secretary Mattis just this morning. I have no doubt that DOD will continue to be our partners in this mission until it is resolved.
So troops along the border have taken extra steps to avoid confrontations with migrants. I talked to the colonel in charge of the Marines over the weekend. So troops along the border have taken extra steps to avoid confrontations with migrants. I talked to the colonel in charge of the Marines over the weekend. U.S. troops have kept their distance from the border even as groups of migrants have made their way to Tijuana. Colonel Kyle Ellison heads Special Purpose Marine Air Ground Task Force 7. When a few people climbed the border fence while the television cameras rolled last week, he did not send his Marines. Instead, the Border Patrol sent a civilian contractor to reinforce that section of the fence.
It is ensuring that we don't put our Marines and soldiers and sailors in a law enforcement type situation. It's not their task. It's not what they're out here for. So if we're going to be in a position where that potential exists to put our young Marines and sailors in a bad situation, I don't do it.
Ellison's headquarters unit is set up in tents inside a Customs and Border Protection maintenance facility. And that's where they'll spend Thanksgiving. Troops won't head home to their families. They can't even stop for tacos on the way back to their temporary bases.
I am not concerned about morale. I am not concerned that Marines are going to have and soldiers will have their head down on Thanksgiving, because they'll get a meal with their brothers and their sisters, and they'll get back out and do their mission the next day.
So far, the operation is scheduled to run until December 15. U.S. Army North issued a statement today suggesting troops in Texas and Arizona could be shifted to California to handle the influx of migrants. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
Our coverage on migrants at the border continues on air and online at kpbs.org. The first 2 legal pot shops opened in Massachusetts today. This comes more than 2 years after voters approved recreational marijuana. Experts see Massachusetts as a potential $1.5 billion market for pot sales every year. A San Diego-based cannabis manufacturer and distributor is at risk of losing its local permit. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says there's a church that shares the same office park.
Vista Prime Management is a cannabis manufacturing and distribution company in this Kearny Mesa office park. The company makes cannabis-infused candies and beverages and has been operating all year with temporary permission from the state and city governments. Next door is Kairos Christian Church, which city staffers saw as a problem since San Diego requires marijuana businesses be at least 1,000 feet from churches, parks, and schools. But for the past few years, the church has been operating without a permit. Attorney Gina Austin represents Vista Prime. She says her client and the church have been coexisting peacefully.
We hope, ultimately everybody can get what they need in order to operate. There's absolutely no desire to kick anybody out or make anything difficult for anybody.
City staffers were initially recommending a hearing officer deny Vista Prime's permit request, but later they changed their mind. The company is getting a hearing Wednesday morning. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
Oh, man. Yeah, this isn't looking good. I'm thinking that I'm going to go nose right, and you tell me what you think.
The Los Angeles Fire Department released video today of a helicopter rescue. This footage was captured earlier this month, and it shows crews dropping water on the Woodsley fire. Pilots braved heavy smoke and almost ran out of fuel. Still, they managed to turn this firefight into a recovery, rescuing 3 people and 2 dogs from a mountaintop near Malibu. The Woodsley fire is now 94% contained. The death toll in the California wildfires has fanned fears about new housing developments being approved in San Diego's unincorporated areas. KPBS North County reporter Allison St. John takes us to the site of one of those developments.
Out here in the hills west of Escondido lies Harmony Grove, just one of the places where county supervisors recently approved hundreds of new homes. Rick Halsey of the Chaparral Institute says this is where the Cocos Fire burned 4 years ago.
And if you look at the bowl-shaped area behind me, it's a perfect fire trap. And the development that they want to put in here has one exit, which is right over there.
Halsey says the semi-rural developments the county has recently approved put thousands of people in danger.
You cannot put thousands of people on the roads and expect them to survive. And that's what happened in Paradise. They had a plan where they were going to do groups of people evacuate. You can't do that. I mean, it happens in a matter of moments. So you've got gridlock on these roads where people are basically dying in their cars because of the heat.
Evacuations in San Diego County are coordinated between the Sheriff's Department and CAL FIRE.
If evacuation were to occur, we have a set of maps.
CAL FIRE's John Heggie says public safety is their #1 priority.
And go ahead and we use these magnets to go ahead and set the maps up, and then we work with our law enforcement cooperators to be able to identify areas that would be either an evacuation order or an evacuation warning. And what we'll be able to do is then be able to give that information to the county, and therefore then you put it out on the alert system and the reverse 911 system. So it's a well-orchestrated dance, so to speak, between us and our law enforcement partners to be able to do these evacuations in a timely manner.
I lived about a quarter mile south of here.
Jim McKim has lived in Harmony Grove for 33 years. He's skeptical.
Just yesterday we saw from power outage in the Santa Leo area, traffic was backed up for about 2 miles going into there just because the stoplights weren't working.
McKim has evacuated his home 3 times, the last time for the Cocos Fire in 2014.
I was standing on our road watching the fire across the hill. The weather changed just like we are today. The wind died down, the onshore breeze came up, and the fire went from that hillside, burned out the Harmony Grove Spiritual Association, and swept over into here all in a matter of minutes. And there was no way they can notify or plan for that.
We do have a good plan in place, but like we were talking about with the intensity and the speed at which these fires are burning, we have to have more than one plan. And some of those plans may be a shelter in place. It's not our first choice. Our first choice would be to get people to a safe place, but maybe that will be a second choice if our first option is closed.
This is where essentially people can come.
Sheltering in place is an option that needs planning and training, says Rick Halsey. He says there are communities that are better prepared for it than others, such as here in Eureka Springs, a community in North Escondido surrounded by chaparral-covered hills. Halsey says ember-resistant vents on all the roofs are a key feature.
People have this notion there's this wall of flame coming and hammering these homes and they're exploding, and people talk like that. And 99% of the homes don't ignite that way. What happens is these little embers get into the attic and they basically burn from the inside out.
Halsey says if developers installed external sprinklers for the houses and sacrificed a few homes to create empty space within a community, it might be viable to shelter in place.
If you got ember-resistant vents on all the roofs, and the development right next door has under-eave misters, which will suppress ember ignition, and then importantly, you've got this park right in the center of this development. This is where they should come. This would be a great place to come for safety.
But sheltering in place is a terrifying option considering the intensity of the wildfires happening now. CAL FIRE's Heggie says when winds are blowing 50 or 60 miles an hour, firefighters stand little chance of controlling the blaze, and he says people need to take responsibility for their own safety.
When the fires are burning rapidly, we don't need people to wait for a message from the fire department or from the sheriffs or from the county. If they feel like they're in harm's way, we want them to evacuate on their own.
Halsey says more can be done to make communities on the rural-urban interface safer, but too many decisions are being made for short-term gain at the cost of long-term risk.
It's borderline criminal neglect to put people in risks like that when they don't consider the future, because that's what planning is supposed to be. It's supposed to be about looking forward, not backward. And here's the problem. We've got this development paradigm based on the last 100 years. We just can't do it anymore because the climate's changed and it's putting people at risk.
This year, San Diego supervisors approved thousands of homes in the hills north of San Marcos and in Otay Ranch to the south near the border. But the county recently postponed a decision on other developments like Lilac Hills in North County until next year.
Here's the bottom line. We're in a different environmental climate now. We can't keep thinking the way we used to think.
The open spaces in the unincorporated inland areas on the edge of town have tempted major developers, but they bring new dangers and new responsibilities to plan for the inevitable wildfires to come. Allison St. John, KPBS News.
Good evening. The weather pattern here is beginning to change, and for most, this is for the better. We're going to introduce more moisture back into California. Now, that will help decrease the poor air quality that we've seen in many spots due to those wildfires. It should also help to reduce your fire weather danger. Now, wet weather is first going to arrive to northern and central California, but as we head on into Thanksgiving, especially in the morning hours, that moisture drops its way farther off to the south, and we are looking for some of those showers to approach San Diego. It's not going to be a heavy rain down here, but it will again be beneficial. Farther off to the north with those heavy downpours, you could get some flash flooding to occur, especially in the burn scar area. So anyone traveling northbound, just be mindful of that through your Wednesday and into Thursday as well. Forecast for tonight around San Diego County, temps are going to be dropping through the 40s and 50s in most spots. We'll dip down to about 48 degrees tonight in Oceanside with an increase in cloud cover. In the metro area, your low temp is 55 degrees, partly cloudy skies. Again, for Wednesday, watching as that rain arrives to northern and central portions of the state. High up in elevation, and Sierra Nevada is looking at some snow in that direction. But again, here around San Diego, we will be staying dry through your Wednesday. High temp going to be up to 70 degrees in Oceanside, 70 in San Diego, Borrego Springs, 76 degrees, Mount Laguna, 53. As we check in on what's going on that future cast, again, dry for Wednesday and into Wednesday night, but there comes that little bit of wet weather around 7 a.m. I do think we'll have some showers around, especially through northern portions of the county. That's going to drift its way on southbound through the afternoon and fade away overall. Your weekend forecast is back to dry weather. At the coast, again, showers in the morning, 68 degrees on Thanksgiving, 67 inland. I'll look at what's going on in the mountain area. 49 degrees on Thursday morning. A few spot showers there, but in the deserts, we will stay dry. Back to you, Ebony.
Frontline and ProPublica present a new investigation into white supremacist groups in America. They focused on one group who was actively recruiting inside the U.S. military. Tonight's investigation shows the group's objectives and how it got stronger.
Back in New York, our Adam Waffen source, John, agreed to talk over video chat with me and my colleague Ollie Winston.
So Adam Waffen Division 2, a Nazi extremist group seeking to spread terror. The main thing is lone wolf activity.
When you say lone wolf attacks, it sounds to me like you're talking about basically terrorist acts?
Yeah, they don't see themselves as terrorists, rather they see the United States as the ultimate terrorist. Like what Adolf Hitler said, how do you meet terrorism? You meet it with stronger terrorism. Adam Waffen is made up of about 60 guys, and then you have what is called initiates. That guys were in the process of becoming members, and in order to become a member, you have to prove yourself.
So how many initiates would you say there are?
Or were.
Or were.
When I left, there was more initiates than there were members. So that tells you anything. All it takes is one guy to snap in to do something like that. That's what Dylan Roof said. I'm tired of saying nothing done in the white nationalist community, so I'm going to take a stand, and I'm going to go into church, and I'm going to kill all these white people, because no one else is doing anything. Who knows, there could be another Dylan Roof and Adam Waffen.
The new documentary is Documenting Hate, New American Nazis. It airs tonight at 10, right here on KPBS. Weak results from retailers and big losses from tech companies caused stocks to drop today. Dow Jones was down by 550 points when the markets closed. The S&P 500 was down 49 points, and the Sandag Composite lost 120 points. Before Yelp, a star rating system for restaurants guided hungry customers. Marketplace reporter Jed Kim has the backstory on how it all started with the company, a tire company rather.
Michelin,
the Oscars of fine dining, those stars that fancy chefs court so dearly, are handed out by Michelin, the tire company. Who knew that? I didn't know that. Did you know that? Christopher Kane from Providence, Rhode Island writes, I've always wondered how a tire company became the go-to guide for fine dining restaurants. One guy who definitely did know that, Wolfgang Puck. We met up with him at Spago, his famous 2 Michelin star restaurant in Beverly Hills. Help us get an idea of how important and how much weight the Michelin star has.
For me, I think they give Michelin is the most important thing. The Michelin guide really can make or break a restaurant.
Are you aware of how the whole system began?
Well, I think it really began with the Michelin, it's a tire company in France.
It started in 1896 with 2 brothers, André and Edouard Michelin. They had built a successful business selling rubber tires for velocipedes. No, not the dinosaurs. Those are those old-timey bikes with one big wheel and one small one. And now they wanted to get in on selling tires for a new invention, the automobile. The trouble was that there were only a few hundred automobiles in all of France at the time. So not the biggest market. So they say, we don't just need to sell tires, we need to sell people on the idea of driving. So in 1900, the brothers published the first Michelin guide. As driving got more popular, so too did the guide. Over the next several decades, Michelin began selling them and introduced a star system for restaurants. 1 star means a good table in its community. 2 stars mean worth a detour. And 3 stars mean worth a journey. Getting a Michelin star means accolades, recognition, esteem. But money? Depends. Chefs from all over the world have reported a 20 to 25% bump in business when they earn their first star. But it's a bit of a dance with the devil, because you can also lose stars. And studies have shown that losing one can cut business in half.
I started crying when I lost my stars.
You started crying?
Yeah, but it's a very emotional thing for any chef. You know, it's like losing a girlfriend. You want her back.
Gordon Ramsay says that he cried when he lost a star.
He might be a very emotional guy, I don't know. Well, I think it's a sad thing. You know, as great as it is to get one, it's even harder when you lose it.
So we found out where the Michelin guide came from. But is it really still the go-to guide for fine dining today? Depends on who you ask. Chef Joachim Splichal owns Patina, another Michelin star restaurant in Los Angeles. How does life change after you get your stars?
Your staff level is high, you have a sommelier, you have $1 million in the wine cellar, you have to constantly invest into the restaurant.
That sounds like it's not worth it.
I think when you're a 2 or 3 star chef, you become a slave of your own business in a sense.
A study by Cornell found that half of the Michelin star restaurants they sampled were not profitable. And many chefs are turning away from the Michelin guide altogether.
90% of the public will not know what the Michelin book is because it's not something that's used that often in America.
But they do know what Yelp is. How much does Yelp factor into your daily thoughts?
Well, I read them every day. Every client who comes in has a meal, is a food critic.
So, is Michelin the go-to guide for fine dining? In France, definitely. In New York, possibly. Anywhere else? Not really. And while it may seem strange today for a tire company to be associated with fine dining, you gotta remember, the Michelin guide started when only the wealthiest people on the planet owned cars. People who wore monocles, smoked cigars, drank fancy wine, ate expensive food. People who looked a lot like the Michelin Man.
Stories from residents in underserved communities will appear on stage in City Heights. It's part of a workshop for first-time playwrights. KPBS reporter Taryn Mentos says this could lead to full-time jobs.
You still ain't blocked that girl? Girl, that's the first thing I did when me and my ex broke up, her and all her friends.
This scene from Mickey Val's upcoming short play features 3 women going through a breakup.
Blocking you yo mama and yo cousin too.
Two characters are teasing another for checking out her ex's social media page.
You get a block, you get a block, you get a block. Everyone's invited to the block party.
Val wrote The X Games based on her own breakup. The hip-hop artist says she didn't see herself as a playwright, but is now hooked thanks to the Old Globe Theater in Balboa Park. Its Community Voices program brings playwriting instruction to residents of neighborhoods that don't often attend its performances.
Myself, friends I know, so many people have been involved with the Old Globe, and just it's opened a pathway that none of us ever saw ourselves taking.
Val completed a beginner's workshop and saw her first short play performed on stage. She went on to do sound design for an Old Globe production. Now, as part of an advanced workshop, she's writing the X Games for an annual festival at the Old Globe.
Last thing I remember, I'm locked up and I need a drink. Insides are killing me and my head feels like it's going to split open.
Jonathan Mello saw his short play about a real-life American couple accused of being Soviet spies performed at a past festival. The City Heights resident and union organizer says he also didn't see a playwriting future until he enrolled in Community Voices.
Seeing the power of theater, the experience as a watcher, but also thinking through how you create those experiences for people. So somewhere in the process, I got the bug.
Like Val, that bug led to an advanced workshop and eventually earned him a pretty big prize at the festival. The Old Globe commissioned him to write a full-length version of his play.
They were something.
The latest beginners cohort of Community Voices is at the City Heights Performance Annex tomorrow evening at 7. The stories you'll see are from first-time playwrights who may follow in the footsteps of Val and Mello.
Heads and arms.
Karen Mento, KPBS News.
Community Voices is funded by the James Irvine Foundation, which also supports KPBS. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.